Persta log, Lieutenant Alex Craig, Stardate 41154.5. I found the door again. I'd not been looking for it exactly, though that is probably not true. I'd been walking without much purpose, letting the ship rearrange itself around me. The main corridors had begun to feel less impossible than they had when I first came aboard, but only just. I could follow the larger routes now, the way back to my quarters, the way to the Arboretum, the way to the more populated sections where the movement of the crew gave the ship a kind of rhythm. But every few turns, there was still some branch I had not taken, some alcove or panel or narrow passage that seemed to promise another version of the Enterprise hiding just beside the one everyone else was using. The corridor was quieter here. I remember that much. The traffic had thinned out several turns back, and the sound of people moving through the ship had faded until there was only the low background hum of the deck beneath me. The door itself was not marked in any special way. It had the same plain paneling as the others, the same narrow window set into one side, the same unhelpful confidence of a door that assumed you already knew why you had come to it. But I recognized it. This is the one I had stopped at before, on my first day aboard, just before Chief O'Brien had called me back. I had tried the panel then, mostly out of curiosity, and the door had refused me with a soft little tone that felt almost personal. This time I touched the control and it opened. I stood there for a second, not because anything dramatic happened, but because nothing did. After all that, after my private little grievance with this particular door, it simply slid aside as if it had been waiting for me all along. Inside was a room that did not immediately explain itself. That was the first thing I liked about it. The light was softer than the corridor light, though not dim. It came from several places at once, washing over a long central work surface, 2 inactive wall consoles, a secondary station built into the far side, and a window that was placed at an odd angle along the outer wall. The room had the equipment of a science lab, almost. It had the proportions of a small lounge, almost. It had the quiet of a place meant for observation, except that the window did not face outward in any ordinary way. It looked back along the curve of the ship, showing the hull as it swept away from the room, and the base of one nacelle extending into the dark. It was not quite a view of space. It was a view of the ship being in space. I stepped inside. The doors closed behind me, and the room became very still. For a while, I only walked around it, trying to decide what someone had meant by putting it here. The central surface was too large for one person and too small for a formal meeting. The consoles were functional, but not arranged in a way that made any obvious sense for a research team. There were no chairs except for 2 narrow ones tucked beneath the side station, and even those looked as if they had been placed there because someone could not decide where else to put them. I went to the window. From there, the Enterprise seemed less like a ship and more like a landscape. The nacelle stretched away in a long pale line, half lit from the room behind me, and half lost in the stars beyond it. I could see just enough of the hull to feel the size of what I was standing inside, but not enough to understand it. "What were they thinking?" I said quietly. "I have wondered that as well." I turned. Lieutenant Commander Data was standing near the opposite wall. I had no idea how long he had been there. For a moment, I simply looked at him, more confused than startled, which was strange enough that I noticed it before I noticed anything else. Usually, when I think I am alone in a room and then discover that I am not, my whole body reacts before I have time to make sense of it. A person sitting silently in a corner, someone stepping out from behind a shelf, even a crew member appearing unexpectedly in the doorway of a lab. Usually I would have jumped, but this was different. I had turned and found someone there, and the alarm had not come. Data regarded me with the same calm expression I had seen from him on the bridge, though from this distance he seemed both less strange and more strange at the same time. "Lieutenant Craig," he said. You know who I am? Yes. You were assigned to the Enterprise as a science officer. You came aboard at Farpoint Station and have since been present in Transporter Room 3, the Arboretum, and several common areas on Deck 8. That's more than I expected you to know. I have reviewed the crew manifest and recent duty logs. Right, I said. Of course you have. He tilted his head slightly. Were you expecting a different answer? No, I don't think so. I looked back toward the door, then toward him again. I think I'm mostly trying to figure out why I didn't jump. Jump? When I saw you, I startle easily. Very easily, actually. If someone is in a room and I don't know they are there, I usually have this ridiculous little panic response, but I didn't. Data considered this. You were surprised by the absence of your own surprise. Yes, I said, that's exactly it. He took one step closer, not enough to intrude, but enough that the conversation had clearly interested him. What do you believe normally produces the response? I don't know. Movement, maybe? Or sound? Breathing? The sense that another person is taking up space before I know they are. Humans often detect one another through small sensory cues before conscious recognition occurs, Data said. Air displacement, vocalization, scent, heat, movement within peripheral vision. That all sounds right. I do not breathe unless doing so is required for speech, he said. I do not produce involuntary vocalizations, and my body temperature is regulated within a narrower range than most humanoids. It is possible that I did not create the usual cues you associate with another presence. That makes sense, I said, but it doesn't quite explain it. In what way? I think I still should have been startled when I saw you, even without the cues. I turned around and there you were. Usually that would be enough. Data was quiet for a moment. Perhaps the response is not caused only by discovering another person, he said. Perhaps it is caused by discovering that the room is no longer the room you believed it to be. I looked back at him. That's interesting. Is it? Yes, very. I was attempting to restate the problem. Well, you made it better. Data seemed to take that seriously. In what way? I thought I was asking you why you didn't startle me, but maybe I'm asking why the room didn't change when I found you in it. He looked around the room as if testing the idea against the walls, the consoles, the window. The room did change, he said. Your understanding of it changed. Yes, but not in the way it usually would. Usually another person changes a room immediately. I hesitated. You start noticing them, I guess. The room feels different. You're aware of them, aware of yourself. And yet, you did not experience that alteration. Not exactly. Data turned his attention back to me. Do you still consider yourself alone? I laughed a little. Not because it was funny exactly, but because the question was so direct and so good that I was not ready for it. No, I said. But I don't feel interrupted either. That distinction appears to be important. It is. Why? I opened my mouth and stopped. I did not know. That should have ended the conversation. With most people it would have. There would have been a small pause, then a change of subject, or one of us would have made a practical comment about the room, or I would have apologized for making the whole thing stranger than it needed to be. Data only waited. Not impatiently, not politely. He seemed genuinely prepared to remain inside the question until there was something more to say about it. I think, I said slowly, being interrupted is not just about someone else being present. It's about being pulled out of the thing you were inside. Your thoughts? Data suggested. Or the room. Or both. Then my presence did not remove you from the experience. No, somehow it became part of it. Data nodded once, very slightly. That may explain your lack of startle response. Maybe. I looked back towards the window. I was trying to figure out what this room was. I've attempted the same task. You have? Yes. And? I have not reached a satisfactory conclusion. That pleased me more than it probably should have. You don't know? No. You looked it up? Yes. And there's no answer? There are partial answers, Data said. The original deck schematics classify the space as an auxiliary research compartment. Later revisions identify it as an observational station. A subsequent systems update marks it as available for reassignment, but no reassignment appears to have occurred. Its current designation is therefore technically accurate, but not informative. That is its current designation? Room 24A. I looked around again. That's terrible. I agree. The way he said it was so plain that I smiled before I could stop myself. You agree? Yes. The designation fails to describe any meaningful attribute of the space. It really does. There are 312 rooms aboard the Enterprise with similarly insufficient designations, Data said. However, this one has attracted my attention. Why this one? I am uncertain. That was even better. I walked back toward the central surface and rested my hand on the edge, looking from the consoles to the window and back again. Maybe somebody meant for it to be one thing and then changed their mind. That is possible. Or several people changed their mind at different times. That is also possible. Or it was useful once, but the ship changed around it. The vessel has undergone multiple design revisions, Data said. Some compartments may have retained structural features from earlier planning stages. So it's a leftover. Perhaps. I like that. Why? I looked around the room again. I don't know, I said. It feels like somebody cared about it. Data looked around the room. In what sense? Like they were building something and changed their mind, but they couldn't quite bring themselves to get rid of this part. The vessel has undergone multiple design revisions. Maybe, I ran my hand lightly along the edge of the central surface, or maybe they just liked it. Data considered that. That is also possible. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room hummed quietly around us. Then Data said, "You are suggesting that the absence of a defined purpose permits a wider range of possible meanings." I looked at him. "Yes," I said, "that's exactly it. That's exactly that." He seemed to register my reaction, though his expression barely changed. "Most officers prefer spaces with clear functions," he said. "I'm sure they do. Unassigned rooms are often considered inefficient. That makes me like it more." Data paused. "I have also found the room appealing." "Because it's inefficient?" I had not described it to myself in that way. But maybe? Perhaps. I moved toward the window again, and after a moment Data joined me. We stood side by side, looking out along the hull. "It's a strange view," I said. "Yes. Not space exactly. No. Not the ship exactly either. No, it is both internal and external. That's why I like it. I believe that may also be why I return here." I glanced at him. "You come here often?" "Yes." "To work?" "Sometimes." "And the other times?" Data looked out at the nacelle. "I have not assigned those visits a category." I felt something in me brighten at that, though I did not know what to call it. "That might be the best answer you could have given." "Why?" "Because if you had said meditation or observation or private study, then the room would start becoming something. But if you don't have a category for it yet, it stays open." "Open?" Data repeated. "Yes." He considered the word. "Open may be an imprecise term," he said, "but I understand your meaning." "That's rare." "Imprecision?" "No. Something understanding... That's rare." "Imprecision?" "No, someone understanding what I mean when I'm being imprecise." Data turned towards me. "Imprecision does not necessarily prevent communication." In some cases, it may indicate that the concept has not yet been reduced to a fixed description. I looked at him for a second. Then I laughed. Not loudly, just enough that the room seemed to accept it. That, I said, is a very generous way of describing the way I talk. Is it inaccurate? No, I said. I don't think it is. We stayed at the window longer than I realized. The conversation moved from the room to the way people name rooms, then to whether a name makes something more useful or less mysterious, then to why certain places on the ship seemed to invite movement while others made people lower their voices. I mentioned the Arboretum, and how it had not felt like an escape from the Enterprise so much as proof that the Enterprise contained more than I expected. Data asked why the presence of soil and plants would alter my perception of a starship. I tried to answer and ended up talking about childhood bedrooms, museums, libraries, and the peculiar sadness of rooms that have been arranged too perfectly. He followed all of it. Not in the way people sometimes follow when they are being kind and waiting for you to finish. He followed as if each turn in the conversation produced a new path worth examining. When I doubled back, he noticed. When I contradicted myself, he did not correct me immediately. He asked whether the contradiction was part of what I meant, when I used the wrong word and then circled around for a better one. He did not rush ahead to the likely conclusion. He stayed with the search. At some point, I realized I had forgotten to be careful. I had only meant to look inside the room. Then Data's communicator chirped. LaForge to Data. Data touched the badge on his chest. Data here. Could you come down to engineering? We've got a diagnostic loop that's giving us a strange readout. It keeps correcting itself before we can pin down what it did. Acknowledged, Data said. I'll report to engineering. The communicator fell silent. Data turned back toward me. It appears I must leave. Right, I said. Of course. For the first time since I had entered the room, I noticed the time. Or rather, I noticed that time had apparently been doing something without me. How long have we been talking? I asked. 47 minutes. Seriously? Yes. I looked back toward the window, then at him. What were we talking about at the beginning? Data paused. I believe the original subject was your lack of a startled response upon discovering my presence. That's right. We have moved considerably from that topic. I know. I did not find the movement inefficient. I looked at him. There was no smile in his voice, no joke, no attempt to make the moment warmer than it was. Somehow that made it warmer. No, I said, neither did I. Data inclined his head slightly, then started toward the door. Just before he reached it, my communicator sounded. O'Brien to Craig. I tapped it quickly. Craig here. You anywhere near engineering? I looked at Data. He looked back at me. I might be, I said. We've got something odd showing up in one of the diagnostic loops. Small thing, maybe nothing, but it reminded me a bit of what we saw earlier in the transporter room. Thought you might want to look. The door opened behind Data, letting in the brighter corridor light. Yes, I said, I would. Good, we're on the lower level near the main core. I'm on my way. The channel closed. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Data said, It appears we are going to the same destination. It does. Shall we proceed together? I looked once more at the strange little room with its useless designation and its half view of the ship. Then I stepped toward the door. Yes, I said, let's.